Hello horror hounds, we're here, the final film in our journey through the great Dario Argento's filmography with his infamous Dracula 3D. According to Wikipedia, Argento had wanted to film a version of Dracula but, quote, could not find a way into it. With the advances in 3D technology, he revisited the idea and felt he could offer a fresh take on the story in 3D. He couldn't. From the off, it's clear that Argento plans to play fast and loose with Stoker's novel, which in and of itself is not a problem. The film opens with Tanya, played by Miriam Giovanelli, a local girl secretly meeting her lover at night, Walpurgis night no less. And this affords Argento the opportunity for the first of many instances of gratuitous female nudity. I'm no prude, and it would be hypocritical of me to pretend that the allure of horror for young boys wasn't the dual taboos of violence and sex. But horror isn't the exclusive domain of adolescent boys. There are loads of female horror fans out there, and it's kind of depressing to have to start a review of a Dario Argento movie with the observation that some bared mammary glands are some of the most notable moments of Dracula 3D. However, Giovanelli is achingly beautiful, and so is Asia Argento, who compliantly gets naked again for her father. But Argento has never really excelled in sexy. His first ever sex scene in Cat o' Nine Tails looks like two mannequins being balanced one atop the other. And everything here is so very, very moribund. Not even Red Shoe Diary levels of soft porn. Look, I'm all for some sexy skin and blood vampire shenanigans. But this has all been done so much more erotically and alluringly over 40 years ago in Hammer's Karnstein trilogy, The Vampire Lovers, Lust for a Vampire and Twins of Evil. And on top of that, there were healthy doses of subversive female empowerment in the formidable form of Ingrid Pitt. Those Hammer films managed to take the subtext of Universal's monster movies and incorporate them as sexual overtones, further pushing the envelope of already subversive texts, injecting fresh life, breaking new taboos, and creating a new wave of horror in the process. Argento's Dracula 3D, by contrast, is just so listless. Whenever the story deviates wildly from Stoker's well-trodden path, my interest is somewhat piqued. The famous praying mantis Dracula, often ridiculed, is so bizarre that I kind of love it. I mean, it's nonsense, but at least it's so off the wall that you know that script brainstorming session must have been a hoot. And then you get Van Helsing's flashback, all too brief, where he was running Carfax Sanatorium and Dracula began attacking his inmates. What was the story there? I want to know. Was Dracula an inmate? Did Dracula break in? Not enough time is spent with that. And there's an interesting setup here between the Count and the townsfolk. Here the townsfolk have made a knowing pact with the Count. He has showered them with his benefaction, provided facilities, amenities, money, and they in turn have agreed to look the other way when their relatives and neighbours are periodically killed by wolves. That's a new dynamic and a new territory to put the Count in, but one that isn't explored and is undercooked. It does lead to one scene, the only scene with any real vim, where the town heads meet to discuss the idea of rescinding their deal with Dracula. Of course, Dracula arrives at the meeting, coalescing from a swarm of flies, and proceeds to dispatch all but one of the gathering. Dracula gets to mete out some ultraviolence here and wear the blood beard that was made fashionable in 30 Days of Night. One of the deaths here even nods to the Stendhal syndrome, which also starred Thomas Kretschmann. The sort of almost slow motion bullet through the mouth shot surely has echoes of a similar death from the Stendhal syndrome. And let's talk about Thomas Kretschmann, who plays Dracula, or rather he plays every famous Dracula performance you could care to mention. His overcoat and swaying way of walking calls to mind Max Schreck's Count Orlok from Nosferatu. His accent is modelled on Bela Lugosi, whilst at times he's the vibrant nobleman of Christopher Lee's Dracula, except when the script needs him in the 11th hour to be the deathless lover reaching out across the centuries. And then you'll catch him making intonations and even gestures lifted directly from Gary Oldman's performance. Unfortunately, in amongst all of these half-baked instances of branching out into new territory, new areas, cutting loose from Stoker's novel, the rest of the film is a sort of box-ticking exercise for bits of Dracula that we need to get in. And I've got no issue with straightforward adaptations of Dracula, but for those I have some keystone elements that they must get right for me. And when Dracula 3D does try to hew more closely to Stoker's novel, it fails to impress. One of those keystones is Jonathan Harker's arrival at Castle Dracula. In this film, it just happens. It's a nothing. Another keystone for me is Vampire Lucy. This has to be a bright spot, a moment of horror in the film, and here again it falls flat and fails despite the best attempts of Dario Argento, who really rings my bells as goth Lucy, especially when she's been fed from and is wan with dark patches under her eyes and dressed all in black. What can I tell you? It made me wish that I was watching a Poe film with her in it, playing Ligeia. Or, for God's sake, Dario, put your daughter front and centre. Focus on Lucy and her story. Make her the hero. Falling under the Count's thrall, killed, resurrected, and then cast aside in favour of her best friend. Damn, that's good. I need to work on that script myself. And then you have Rutger Hauer as Abraham Van Helsing. I can't bring to mind any other Dutch actor who has played the Dutch character of Van Helsing. And try as he might, Rutger, he only turns up for the last 30 minutes. And then Dracula sends his minions one after another to do battle with him. Tanya, then a townsman who's on his side, then the Renfield character. But they're all dispatched in one move. There are no fight sequences or escalations of battles culminating in facing off with Dracula. It's just some stuff that happens in the last 30 minutes. Claudio Simonetti, he of Goblin, long-term collaborator with Dario Argento, once again provides the score here and appears to be going for high camp. The most prominent instruments are a violin to provide some kind of traditional folksy gypsy sounding theme for Dracula, and a theremin for spooky sound effects whenever any creature whatsoever appears. I mean, I'm talking a badly CGI'd spider, a badly CGI'd owl, some badly CGI'd cockroaches. You get the idea. Much more entertaining is Simonetti's song that plays over the end credits, Kiss Me Dracula, that you can watch in 3D as an extra on the disc, and I will link to the video down below. It plays a lot like a mid-90s Bosnian entry into the Eurovision Song Contest, trying to sound like Evanescence. If this film was a joke, a parody, I think Simonetti is the only one who is in on it. So how about the 3D? Because if a film is intended for 3D, I like to watch it in 3D. That means I dropped $30 on a German Blu-ray of this mother. If anything, the biggest way that the 3D hurts the film, because it doesn't help the film, is that it forces Argento to make an extraordinarily well-lit, crisp-looking vampire film, automatically robbing it of any potential of shadows and atmosphere. To create a sense of depth, an awful lot of the sets look strangely empty and large, and some of the backdrops seem to be computer generated, giving the whole thing the occasional feel of the 80s children's program from the UK, Nightmare with a K. Any American viewers intrigued in looking that up, check out Nightmare with a K on YouTube and you can thank me later. There are also long stretches of the film that look like cutscenes from these point and click Dracula games. There are times when I honestly thought that the vibe of Dracula 3D most closely aligns to Mel Brooks' Dracula Dead and Loving It. Except without the laughs. The film certainly begins with Argento's trademark camera in motion, but then very quickly, maybe it was the difficulty working with the 3D cameras, but the scenes become static, shot head on. Very few tracking shots, very little motion, establishing shot, two-shot, close-up. It's almost as if Argento stopped and someone else took over. Dario Argento made his directorial debut the same year I was born. He's literally been making horror movies for as long as I've been alive. Whilst I take no pleasure in damning his last feature film, and honestly I took no pleasure watching it either. I'd like to round off the Dario Argento season as it should be, with acknowledging a true master and visionary of horror, with a roll call like The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, Four Flies on Grey Velvet, oh my god, Deep Red, Profondo Rosso, Suspiria, Inferno, Tenebrae, Phenomena, Opera. Dario, you are the maestro and I salute you. Grazie, grazie mille.